Session for the 31st Guam Youth Congress is hereby called to order. I call on Representative LeBang for the prayer.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, thank you for this day and help us decide on the issues we're going to talk about today. Bless everyone's family and friends and keep us safe from harm and make us healthy. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. I call on Representative DiCioso for the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early
I call on Representative Quintanilla for the Guam hymn.
Fanogita Moru.
I call on Representative Cruz for the Inifresi.
Inifresi. Dimastaculum Deus. Dimastaculum Deus. Zedimas figu narinas yahu. Uat pesin maisenza. Parabaku taili. Zanudi fendi. Ihenengi. Ikutura. Inengwahi. Iairi. Ihanum zanitanum chamonu. Biring shaku diretsu dimunatulo stata. Estivo dimna. Ibli bilia.
You may be seated. get first roll call?
Representative Angara. Representative Blas. Representative Casilla. Representative Cruz. Representative Dichoso. Representative Felison. Representative Lebang. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Makepeace. Representative McDonald. Representative Kenny McDonald. Representative Quintaniza. Representative Richards. Representative Rigetti. Speaker Santos. Representative Tamagan. Representative Valencia. Mr. Speaker, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to call for approval of the legislative journal. Representative Valencia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to move that items 7 to 11 be waived from the legislative session agenda.
There's been a motion to waive items 7 through 11 of the agenda. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Moving on to item 12, introductions and first reading of bills and resolutions. Could I get the first reading of the agenda today?
Bill number 22-31, as amended by the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs, introduced by Christian F. Valencia, Jacob G. Richards, Keandra M. McDonald, Stephanie F. L. Lorenzo, Javen W. Santos. An act to establish a youth mental health first aid training and certification program for all Guam Department of Education GDOE personnel, to appropriate a sum of $120,000 to be amortized for a period for 3 fiscal years for the implementation of the program, and to cite this act as the Youth Mental Health First Aid Act of 2018. Bill number 24-31, as amended by the Committee on Public Safety, Judiciary, and Homeland Security, introduced by Gia C. Rigetti. An act to amend Section 10.25 of Chapter 10, Title 8, Guam Code Annotated, relative to increasing the age of consent from 16 to 18 years of age, and citing this act as Age of Protection Act of 2018. Resolution number 18-31, introduced by Al Eldridge C. Lebang, relative to amending Section 16.01A of Iminet 31 na Congression Manhoben Guahan Aden Aclamentu, the 31st Guam Youth Congress Standing Rules pertaining to the membership and composition of standing committees.
Thank you. Moving on to motions. Are there any motions? Representative Rigetti, you are recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I move to place Bill 24-31 on the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 24-31 in the second reading file for discussion. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Representative Rigetti, you can make your opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to make my introduction of this bill fairly brief. I would like to open up the floor and hear more from the other representatives. The intent of my bill, I hope that we've all had a chance to read this and to look at it. It's something that I've always felt deeply passionate about, something that I've been wanting to put on the floor for quite a while, actually, because I think it's something that affects, obviously it affects the youth, but I think it's something that extends further than that. I think it has a a deep social impact, raising the age of consent from 16 to 18. And a lot of people, when you talk about consent, there's many factors in there, but the thing that I'm seeing the most is that when we give young women and men opportunities to control kind of this their feelings in this, this ever-changing world, it's not enough to just rely on what they've learned in school or what they've learned through their peers and interactions. It's kind of necessary to set some sort of standards or some sort of level that we can recognize at one point that they're still young, they're still learning. As you can recall, we introduced the tobacco bill to raise the age of purchasing tobacco products, and now it's at 21. And we did this out of a need to protect the youth and what we saw as an addictive substance kind of thing. And so that's kind of where this bill is coming from, not equating consent and all that to tobacco, but it came out of a need for us to protect those who we thought were vulnerable, that were still developing, their brain was still developing, the science was there. And I think that that's very similar in this case, is that when you allow someone to maybe have just a couple more years to control or to have this sense of power or just a knowledge that they can be safer, maybe just 2 years more, if they're able to control that time and to know more about what consent is and what a healthy relationship is. And so that's kind of the introduction or the background behind why I'm introducing this bill. So I'd like to open the floor up for discussion on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rigetti. Is there anyone who would wish to speak on the bill? Representative Representative Felison, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know. This seems nice. This seems like a bill that is more like it's like a solution to like a problem that I don't really know what the problem is, because like, how many mothers are on Guam that are 16? How many 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds have STIs or STDs or along those sexual transmitted diseases? And I think probably enforcing sexual education and such like that in freshman year specifically, because I mean 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds, their hormones and testosterone's very high, and I don't really think age of consent would really stop them from doing such acts. And if anything, I think raising it, if a 16-year-old or 17-year-old were to get caught having consensual sex, if this bill were to pass, I wouldn't really want to see 16 and 17-year-olds in prison for doing things that their bodies and their hormones, like, kind of, because lust is quite a powerful thing, so to say. And I think keeping it at 16 is fine right now, as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Felison. Is there anybody else who would wish to speak on the bill? Representative LeBang, you are recognized.
It's just a point of order. The new section is not added to the title. Just, can we amend for the new section 25.50 of Chapter 25, Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, reflect on the title?
I'm sorry, is that a motion?
An amendment.
Could you repeat that amendment?
Amend to add a new section to reflect on the title, add new section 25.50 of Chapter 25, Title 9, Guam Code Annotated.
Oh, so that's the, for the section 4 to be reflected in the title.
Yeah, reflect on title.
Okay. There's a motion to reflect the section 4 in the title of the bill as a whole. Is there anyone objecting to that? Representative Rigetti? Is there anyone objecting? Seeing as there are none, amendment passes.
I think moving up to 18 is a great idea for me. The thing with teenage pregnancy here on Guam is rising as well. So with raising this to 18, I think we can safeguard everyone and that we can put everyone in the right direction. And basically, like most people here on Guam has done is that they won't finish their education and maybe end up on the system and rely on federal subsidies that the government offer, not subsidies, I mean federal social welfare that we offer. I think 18 years old is the right age, and laws are not absolute. It changes every time, and it changes per generation. And by changing this, I think in this generation, 18 will be a sufficient age that we have consent. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. Representative McDonald, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this measure for two reasons. One is what Representative Rigetti spoke about earlier, was raising the tobacco age. I think what we've done now is we've made these weird age differences between certain things. So you have to be 21 to smoke, you have to be 21 to drink, but yet you can still be 16, or they're 18 for that, whatever age for this and that. And it doesn't seem fair to a lot of people, especially when they don't know the laws right now. It can be kind of confusing for young adults when they're trying to figure out what they can do and what they can't do. So that's one of the reasons why I think raising the age to 18 would make at least the laws a little simpler. Another reason is that what do we hear every time we go on the news, right? We hear these horrible things that portrays Guam as something that it shouldn't be. So a lot of states within the United States have already raised their age from 16 to 18 or 17. And as someone said earlier, that sexual education, even though it's good, a lot of teenagers look at the sexual education and the pregnancy stuff, and they think that they're okay because they can handle it. Like, all teenagers think I can handle it, even though, I've done that too. Like, oh yeah, I could do it, but when it comes up to the grind, I can't do it. So I think that's important to keep in mind is, yeah, right now the numbers might not seem like it's benefiting, but this is not to punish 17-year-olds from, it's to punish people who are above the age of 18 having sexual intercourse with people who are below the age of 18. This is to protect the minors. It's not for the minors to get in trouble. It's for the people who are taking advantage of minors to get in trouble. So, yes, that's it.
Thank you, Representative McDonald. I just wanted to point out that before we continue the discussion, I think there might be a misunderstanding in the bill as in regards to Section 4, which states that if a person is not less than 5 years older than the minor, then they cannot be committing the offense according to the way that the bill is written. So I don't know if that, I just wanted to point that out just in case everyone's not aware of that, but we can move on in the discussion. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak on the bill? Representative Quintanilla, you're recognized.
I agree with the intent of this bill. am going to vote in its favor.
Thank you, Representative Quintanilla. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak on this bill? Seeing as there are none, is there anyone who would, or Representative Rigetti, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had hoped for more discussion on this bill. I think it's very important, and I think that there might be some points that are being missed here. It's not about regulating sexual relations between minors and see, that's the thing is minors. Like on Guam, you have to be 18 to vote. When you get a permit, you have to have someone who's 21 with you present. And you're 16 when you get your permit, so there's an establishment already that you need an adult if you're going to drive a vehicle. It could be a lethal weapon. There's just this understanding that at certain ages you're capable or you're knowledgeable of certain things, and yes, you learn it in school. You learn all these things, but reality hits you, and it hits you hard. And there are so many things on Guam where we let our youth decide at some point, this is your freedom, you have these freedoms. I mean, at one point you were able to consume alcohol at 18, and I mean, you can argue back and forth on whether that's appropriate or not, but we've raised the age to 21 for many things out of a need to protect people. And this is about protecting people. This is about protecting someone's future. This is about protecting lives because there's people that are not ready and I'm not just trying to talk about women here, I'm talking about men too, because young men have a role in this, and they're potential fathers, they're potential mothers. It's overwhelming and it's shocking when, and I've had friends too, and Al was just saying, like in his class alone, there was maybe like 5 students who were pregnant, and it's not just the women you look at, it's the men too that are part of their lives. Or maybe not a part of their lives, or maybe it wasn't something that was planned. And you're asking people to take this one moment, this realization that suddenly their life is about to change. And then there's another aspect too. It's at 16 right now, and like you said, we kind of had this statute or this a close-in age exemption, and we put it at 5 years, right? It's really about. There's instances where there's gray areas, like if someone's 15 or 16, are they allowed to have a relationship with someone who's a bit older or over the age of 21? If you're over 21 in a relationship with someone who's maybe 16, you can purchase alcohol, and you can make a situation where you have someone who's still developing, still in school, and you could potentially have this dangerous situation where this one male, female, whoever it is, that's older, that's 21, and buying these products and creating the situation where someone could be taken advantage of, male, female, doesn't matter. And basically, this is just a way to protect. This is a way to protect people's safe state of mind. It's a way to protect and to show people that, you know what, maybe 16, maybe we need to protect our minors more than we're doing. If we're protecting their ability to make decisions on whether or not they can consume tobacco or whether they can, go out and purchase alcohol products, we're saying, hey, just give you 2 more years and you have this ability to make maybe a better decision, or maybe a decision that, you can look back and say, hey, maybe this law helped me because I was in a really bad situation. I was in a bad relationship and I was 16, and maybe I didn't know it at the time, but had I just waited, maybe I would be in a better place than I was at that time. And so that's really what this bill is about, and I really urge your support on this bill, and I think that has great implications for the future when we're looking at, maybe these cases where, there was a bad relationship. And it's very much up to the discretion of the courts if there was some sort of criminal aspect involved. Criminal aspects occur when consent wasn't given, and something was taken by force or coercion, something like that was involved. That's in the definition. But to me, consent is more than that. Consent is knowing fully the implications, knowing fully your rights, your powers in a relationship. And that's why just moving this age from 16 to 18 gives whoever is involved in the relationship more power over consent and to really know what that means. So that's why I introduced this bill, and that's why I'm asking for your support.
Representative Rigetti, before you close, I just wanted to point out that you made an example of a 16-year-old and a 21-year-old. Well, I just was curious because the bill in its current form does allow an exemption like that to take place.
Yes, that's correct. And and we discussed it in the committee, and I would like having it my way. I would like maybe to if someone wants to make an amendment for 4 years, then I'm open to it. It's something like that number was put out there, and I think we believe, was it based on a different state, right? So if you think that it might be more necessary or prudent to amend it, just keeping in mind that on Guam, there are many crimes that occur, and this island is kind of in a state of just, it's dangerous out there for young men and women. It really is, and that's, kind of where I see the need for legislation to take place and to, just make it a little bit safer for both parties.
Representative McDonald, you are recognized.
I'm a little confused with Section 4. Because the age of consent is going to be raised to 18.
Mm-hmm.
So is this an exemption? Or
Yes.
is this? Oh, okay.
So within those age ranges, the offense of criminal sexual conduct can't be, it's an exemption, so they can't commit that act because of the exemption, statutorily.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I believe Representative Richards also had a... Oh, okay. Okay, Representative Valencia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to pose a few questions to the author, if I may do so. If she would yield.
I yield to the question.
Representative Rigetti, you yield?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to ask what really the age of consent pertains to. Does it specifically just pertain to, I guess, sexual crimes, or what else does it pertain to? Does it also pertain in terms of like taking a photograph of somebody, just in general?
Representative Rigetti.
Yeah, so primarily to give consent, this is, we're talking about sexual acts. As far as photographs, I mean, I'm not very rehearsed at all on if like child pornography laws or something like that, but I mean, when I was doing research, I mean, Canada has something like they have, just like any other place, they have trafficking, and especially child trafficking. So when you're talking about consent and everything, they, what is it? So if you were to take a photograph or disseminate or distribute images of children, well, minors, that were aged, I believe in Canada it's 14, actually. So they made it, all right, like, okay, 14 and under, it's child pornography, even though their consent, age of consent in Canada is 16. So that's kind of where they put the exception. So it's not like possessing child pornography if that person's 16, it's 14. And that's kind of what I based it on. But for this bill, consent is the ability to give consent for sexual relations. And anything absent of that, no consent, that's where it becomes criminal.
Also, in terms of the age of consent, I mean, does it also pertain to, besides what you said regarding sexual contact, does it also pertain to consenting in terms of work? or is that a whole different ball game? Oh, in terms of, does it also pertain to working? I mean, the.
Oh, are you talking about child labor laws?
Yes, child labor laws.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. When in the statute that it's under, we took from the, what is it, Title 8, Chapter 10, Title 8, and that did not mention anything about work or labor laws. So it's very specific to, I think, sexual relations.
Okay. And also, since we're raising it to the age of 18, does that mean that would mean that all sexual contact for minors under 18 is illegal? I'm just making sure.
So we're talking about consent. That's the key word here is consent,
Right.
to give consent. So if you're getting very technical about it, I wouldn't say it's at all banning sexual relations between people, well, in this case, 18 and under. It's just saying consent. Now, the reason why this is so important is because if you have a case with someone who had some sort of relationship with someone and it became sexual, and if maybe they went back and looked at it and said, maybe I wasn't consenting fully, maybe this isn't what I had wanted, it allows for that case, should someone want that case to be brought forward, that they have that power to bring it forward and say, maybe, I didn't want this, and that's when it becomes criminal. There's a criminal aspect to this, to not being able to give, when you don't give consent, that's when someone can bring it forward and say, this needs to come before a court of law. So that's what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's all from me.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Thank you, Representative Rigetti. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the bill? Representative McDonald?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to propose an amendment to Section 4. Instead of it saying less than 5 years, I think we should make it less than 3, or maybe even less than 2, because if we're trying to raise the age of consent to 18, what's the purpose if we're just saying that there's an exemption? Because it doesn't seem like it's very cohesive with the intent and the bill itself. So I know there's a reason why you want to choose 4 or 5, but I think if it's to protect the Manhoban, then we need to kind of narrow the bill down a little so it's more cohesive with the intent and there is no huge gap in exemptions.
So is your amendment 3 years or 2 years?
I would like to amendment to 3 years.
So there is an amendment to Section 4 of the bill where line 12, where it reads the person is not less than 5 years older, shall read the person is not less than 3 years older. Is that correct? We will now open the floor for discussion of that amendment. Is there anyone who would wish to speak on the amendment? On page 2, line 12, where it reads the person is not less than 5 years older than the minor, the amendment shall read the person is not less than 3 years older than the minor. Is there anyone who would wish to speak on the amendment? Representative Rigetti?
I would like to thank Representative McDonald for introducing the amendments. I think you're right that this is more in line with what the intent of the bill is, and so I'm glad that you saw the need to protect the youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rigetti. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing as there are none, all in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Motion is carried. Now, moving on to the discussion of the bill as a whole after that amendment was passed. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak on the amendment or on the bill as currently amended? Seeing as there are none, Representative Rigetti, you can make your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to place Bill 24-31 into the third reading file.
Is there anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, motion carries. Moving on to, or we are still in motions. Is there any other motions? Representative Valencia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to place Bill number 22-31 as amended by the committee on the second reading file and be afforded the opportunity to speak on the bill.
There's been a motion to place Bill 22-31 in the reading file for discussion. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Representative Valencia, you can make your opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bill number 22-31, as amended, is an act to establish a youth mental health first aid training and certification program for all GDOE employees. And to allow this program to continue, I would also included in the bill an appropriation of $120,000 to be amortized for a period of 3 fiscal years. So that would mean that $40,000 will be afforded every 3 years, or it's up to the legislature if this bill were to pass, as long as everything adds up to $120,000. I introduced this piece of legislation because of 3 reasons. First, I feel that there is a need to address mental health issues in our youth on island. According to stats from the Peace Office, suicide deaths in Guam occur predominantly in young people, and about 60% of our youth, or 60% of these of suicide deaths occur in those under 30 years of age. Also, there are elevated rates of depression and risk factors for mental distress, such as bullying and sexual violence among our youth. Second, I believe that there is an ongoing change in the mindset nationally around the stigma of mental health, and as well as around the world, as we can see in Canada and some European countries. And I believe that this piece of legislation continues that conversation and brings it to the forefront of our issues here on island. Also, a national survey conducted by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention found that 9 out of 10 adults, or 89% of American adults, feel that mental health and physical health are equally important. And finally and lastly, I believe that we have a shared responsibility in ensuring the well-being of our youth, because ensuring the mental health of our youth is will benefit our society. Now, in terms of the piece of legislation, it's comprehensive. I have, over the course of the last 6 months, I don't know if it's 6 months, but beginning in November, I spoke to many stakeholders regarding this piece of legislation. I spoke to the superintendent of the Guam Department of Education. I spoke to some personnel at the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, and a few days ago I spoke with the program director of IFA Maguunta, or iCare Guam, at the Peace Office, Ms. Carissa Pangilinan, who is in charge of the Youth Mental Health First Aid Program and certification here on island. In fact, I know that what this bill looks like, it might look like an overreach into the Guam Department of Education in terms of training and certification for, especially for teachers. I mean, it's normal that we're going to get some backlash from some of our hardworking teachers. But I have spoken to Superintendent Fernandez, and he has assured that GDOE is in support of the direction of this legislation. It's just the issue of costs and the broader aspect of the implementation, which I believe that this bill addresses. I've also, in my meeting with the program director, Ms. Carissa Pangilinan at iCare Guam, she has told me that they currently have 6 certified youth mental health first aid training instructors. So they're working really hard to train a lot of the individuals on island, and the goal is, of course, to have everyone be certified in youth mental health first aid. I mean, they've already trained a total of 277 individuals since July 2016, and they're looking forward to training some more. Right now, specifically in the Guam Department of Education, we have 110 personnel that have been certified in this particular program, and certified as well. So that actually tells us that GDOE this has been already ongoing, and this piece of legislation just solidifies the efforts of both the Department of Education and the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. It's just, with what Superintendent Fernandez talked about in terms of funding, I believe that Ilesa Turanguahan, or the Guam legislature, can find an appropriate sum of $120,000 for the implementation of this program. I mean, if education and if our youth is a priority of many of our politicians and many of our elected leaders and appointed leaders here on this island, I believe that it only makes sense to support this piece of legislation. And I am looking forward to the support of my colleagues here, and if you could join me in this effort in ensuring that the youth in our schools can find solace in those that surround them, and those that they see every day, and the people that they interact with every day, and who have a shared responsibility in their well-being. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on the bill? Representative LeBang, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am in support of this bill. I also received a message from the president of the Guam Federation of Teachers, Mr. Sanjay Sharma. On his message to me, he said, I quote, "I've gone through the training and received certification for it. I think it's worth a while and can take place during our professional development days without much cost." So he is in support of this bill as well. I feel as a future educator, having a certification for mental first aid should be included with having training and certification for CPR and for student safety. Having teachers be trained to help students who are mentally challenged would benefit both the students and the Department of Education. We may all have seen Netflix series 13 Reasons Why, a series where a female student named Hannah Baker committed suicide to mental illness and depression. Furthermore, she left recorded tapes where she specified the reason why she committed suicide, and the tape was passed through 13 people who was part of her depression, and she feels that contributed to her choice. Through the series, his friend Clay Jensen heard the various reasons why she took her life, where he feels that everyone in school, mostly those who were in Hannah Baker's tape, were somehow involved and reliable for her death. Some of us may know that in the series, Hannah was mentally broken through her traumatic experiences, such as family problem, being bullied and raped. Hannah tried to reach help to the school counselor, but he did not fully recognize that she needed immediate help. Moreover, in the second season of the series, the parent of Hannah Baker filed a lawsuit against the high school she attended due to negligence that the school could prevent suicide of Hannah Baker. 13 Reasons Why is criticized for romanticizing suicide. But I use this series to support this bill that youth are really in high risk of getting depressed and probably cause suicide, or even worse, more destructive nature, which is school shooting. Yes, in the second season, it almost happened in the end, but they stopped it. And with this bill, I think we can also protect the Department of Education for getting sued for negligence, for not helping people that needs mental attention. I also believe on the debate, either gun and mental health is a cause of shooting in America. I would say that the group saying the gun is the cause or mental is the cause. I say that both mental health and gun is a cause. Being mentally insane can happen to anyone, and the intent of the bill and deterrent killer, but irresponsible storage of handling of gun is also a cause. Returning back to the intent of the bill, the benefit for the Department of Education for the mental first aid certification is that we will not neglect recognizing the symptoms of mental illness. We could prevent youth suicide and lower the statistic for suicide rate among youths. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak on the bill? Representative Lorenzo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for Representative Valencia, if he will yield to a question.
You may ask your question.
So, Representative Valencia, can you just give a breakdown of like the amount of funding and what it would pertain to?
Okay.
Representative Valencia, do you yield?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So the $120,000, that was the amount provided to me by the Guam Department of Education. That was from the superintendent. Right now we have about 4,000 employees. That's everybody. Teachers, school aides, everybody. Right now, the funding really is just for the manuals. I've spoken to the program director for the Youth Mental Health First Aid here on island, and she said that the trainers do not charge training fees. It's really just the manuals, which are $20 each, right? And if we want to implement this program, it's going to take about around 100,000. 120,000 is the maximum amount that was given to me by the superintendent. It was a range. It was a range from 100,000 to 120,000. I took the highest amount, and that can be subject to change. You know, that's up to the legislature if they end up taking up this legislation. But I've also, if it comes to a problem of funding, I've also spoken to the program director at iCare Guam, and she said that they are possibly looking into the prospect of having class sets for these manuals. I mean, sometimes these manuals just end up collecting dust on the shelves, and nobody ever opens them since the first training. But yes, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at a class set for each training, and I think that might be a promising idea, and that can be delved into in the coming weeks, months, as we continue the conversation on this piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Do you have any further questions, Representative Lorenzo?
No further questions at this time, but I would do like to say my testimony in support of this bill. So May is the month of mental health awareness, and throughout the month you probably saw different nonprofit organizations holding forums, different trainings. One nonprofit that really stood out to me was TUMA, is Talk Up Mental Awareness, and they held like a coffee mixer at Hoffa Coffee, and they invited a lot of people, as much people as they could, to come down and, you know, to help stop the stigma that is surrounded by mental health. And unfortunately, you know, especially in the Chamorro society, mental health is still a taboo subject. And so I feel like the more people who are aware of it and we could just stop the stigma. I personally went to the youth mental health first aid training, and my facilitators, you know, if I took anything out of the training, it was our acronym, which is ALGE, and that how children at the age of 10 were committing suicide. 10 years old. I mean, personally at 10 years old, I was trying to figure out what I was gonna bring to lunch that day. And there are 10-year-olds here on this island who are already committing suicide because they don't have an outlet to express their emotions, they don't see a way out. And personally, that is a loss of potential. I personally don't know the numbers yet, but I'm assuming it's very high if a 10-year-old has no other way but to commit suicide. I fully support this bill, not only because I co-sponsored it, but because this is something that I feel could help others. If we have people, if all GDOE personnel is trained to see the signs that a student or a child needs mental help, then maybe we could save another kid. You know, it's kind of like the starfish story. We're not going to save everyone, but we can make a difference for that one kid. And my biggest goal for this is that we could not only limit it to GDOE personnel, but to maybe have some students be involved, because maybe talking to a teacher, you don't really want to open up to an authority figure, but you could talk to someone your age, one of your close friends. We don't know that the possibilities are endless in this, and I really hope that, you know, you guys do support this bill, because it is something that this island needs. We need to help our youth in any way that we can. But yes, I really hope that you guys support this bill. I'm strongly passionate about this bill, and thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lorenzo. Is there anyone who would wish to speak on the bill? Representative McDonald, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When Christian emailed me telling me he was writing this bill, I got really excited. And the reason I got excited is because, as the retiring speaker said, that there is a stigma about mental health, and especially here on the island, you can see it, because look at the rates on Guam. It's really high, and recently, you think it can never happen to you, where someone you're close to is going through something that you can't understand and you can't see. And one of my family members, her best friend recently, committed suicide, and no one, she actually reached out for help, but she said she was fine, and no one knew that she wasn't really okay. So I really commend Representative Valencia, and I just want to say thank you for putting this bill, because this is something, we're always talking about, oh, we don't have enough funding for this and that, but this is a priority, because without the safety and the well-being of mental health, our society as a whole is going to go down. Before we can fix the superficial problems on our island, we need to fix the internal problems. So I rise in support of this bill, and I think as soon as this legislation is passed, we as a body, we need to work together and push this through the actual legislature. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative McDonald. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak on the bill? Representative Richards, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to clarify a point that I feel is important. The intent of the bill is not to train GDOE personnel to be psychiatrists or psychologists, or give them any role in diagnosing mental illness in their pupils, but it's to help them identify the signs and to intercept before it leads to anything drastic like suicide or becoming violent to others, or if there's abuse involved in continuing that cycle of abuse. And I'm saying this because Representative Valencia mentioned that there might be some backlash from teachers And I feel like one of the biggest reasons is that they might feel this is an extra responsibility that they might even be afraid of taking on. But it's not to make them responsible in identifying the mental illness itself, but to intercept them and to guide them to places like Guam Behavioral Health or to a certified psychiatrist or psychologist. And I feel if they can't take on that responsibility, it should already be under one of their responsibilities as a teacher. And if they can't do that, then I would suggest that they find another profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Richards. Is there anyone else who would wish to speak on the bill? If not, we do have an amendment that was submitted by Representative Valencia.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. It's just a formality. If we could turn our attention to page 4, line 11. And certification of all personnel required in Section 2 of this Act, that should say Section 3, not Section 2. Section 2 is the legislative findings and intent. Section 3 is pretty much the meat of the legislation. I'm moving that we amend, instead of Section 2, it should say Section 3. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Is there anyone who would wish to speak on the amendment? Anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Now, speaking on the bill as currently amended, is there anyone who would wish to give testimony on bill number 22-31? Seeing as there are none, Representative Valencia, you can make your closing statements.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to thank my colleagues here in the Guam Youth Congress for their support of this legislation and for helping me write this piece of legislation and helping me in the effort to push this legislation. And also, I would like to give thanks to the stakeholders who helped me come to this bill. That would be Superintendent John Fernandez, Dr. Annette M. David, Ms. Carissa Pangilinan at iCare Guam, and the rest of her personnel and her trainees who work hard every day to protect our youth on this island. And I'm hoping that if, in the event that we pass this legislation today, we can, if the Youth Congress can help me push this legislation into the Guam legislature and really solidify our efforts in protecting our youth. Because if mental health challenges, if left untreated, if left neglected, it's a burden to our society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Is there a motion?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to move to place Bill number 22-31 as amended by the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs into the third reading file. Thank you.
Is there anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We are still in motions. Is there any other motions? Representative Labang, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move to place Resolution 18-31 to second reading file to discuss.
Is there anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, motion is carried. Representative Labang, you can make your opening statement.
Colleagues, I want to bring attention that Rule 16 of the Standing Rules, Section 16.01, if you have your rules manual, it's on page 41. Section 16.01A of the rules states, the standing committee shall be composed of not less than 6 voting members and no more than 8 voting members, except for Committee on Rules. End quote. My fellow colleagues, committees in legislation is very important. It is where we discuss the effects of the bill and how would it affect the people and the constituents that we represent. Some committees have only 3 members, and that is in the violation of the section I previously mentioned. In one of the committee I'm part of, the General Government Operation Committee, there's only 3 of us. And the reason why there's only 3 of us left in the committee is because of some representatives that was removed due to not fulfilling their duties and 4 expiring their terms because they graduated. The word shall on the section make it compulsory, meaning that we should follow. And I think if we still have these rules, if we amend it, we would accommodate to have, since we have a lower amount of representative now, that will be sufficient for us committees to hold. And with the current stature that we have on our rules, I think it might not be sufficient anymore to have more than 6 members in a committee. Because how many are we right now? Mr. Speaker?
I believe we're at 17.
At 17. So I think there's like 3/4. Like, if we're gonna have each committee to have 6. And like, not everyone in here joins a lot of committee. Some of us only join 1 or 2. So I think by amending it to no more than 3 and not more than 6 will be sufficient. But if anyone want to amend it to not more than 3, not less than 3, not more than 8, then I'll be open if someone want a motion to do that.
I just wanted to point out that you said 6, but the resolution says 5. I just wanted to point that out because the resolution says 5. But
I think I put 5.
okay.
Because I did this one like at the middle of the night and I'm already groggy.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Coding the rules is made for us to abide and not to disobey. I hope that everyone supports this resolution. That's all.
All right, thank you, Representative Labang. Is there anyone who would wish to speak on the resolution? Representative McDonald, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question. How much longer do we have in our term?
I believe that we usually inaugurate in October or November.
Of this year?
Yeah, this year. So our term ends in a couple months.
Okay, so I just want to say because our term ends in a couple months, I don't rise in support of this resolution, basically because the reason why we're having these number disparities is because people are leaving, and this is the season that people are leaving, and it doesn't seem fair to just change the rules all of a sudden when we're at the point where people are not leaving anymore, if that makes sense. So I don't support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McDonald. Is there Representative Richards? You are recognized.
I actually think in the opposite way. I feel that that this might be a good idea because we're not only thinking about our term now, but terms in the future. And like you said, there's a regular time for people to be leaving, and we don't want to have to run into this problem again. So if we have this change in the rules to allow for this time when there are less representatives, then I feel like it's a pretty good idea. And with that being said, I'd like to propose the amendment that Representative LeBang suggested to leave it so that the amendment will read on line 8 on page 2, not less than 3 voting members and no more than 8 voting members.
There is an amendment currently on the floor. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on it? Representative Valencia, you're recognized.
I just wanted to clarify. So that would mean that we're not amending that particular language. So we're just leaving it at 8. Mr. Speaker.
That's your amendment, Representative Richards?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the amendment to, just in case anyone's not clear, the amendment is to leave the maximum as it's written in the rules right now, which is 8. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on that amendment? Is there anybody opposed? Seeing as there are none, the amendment passes. Now, speaking on the resolution as a whole, is there anyone who wishes to speak? Representative Valencia, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to commend the author with regards to the intent of this resolution. However, I'm just worried about, with regards to changing the language in terms of from 6 to 3 voting members. I mean, I know that that's already happening. That's already been happening in this term, and I'm just worried. I just would like to point out that that would mean that 3 people would be in charge of referring out a bill or discussing a bill or making amendments to a particular bill. I'd just like to point that out, Mr. Speaker. And I don't know how I'm going to vote yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the resolution? Seeing as there are none, Representative LeBang, you can make your closing statement.
Mr. Speaker, I think with this resolution, it will set a precedent for future youth Congress. But the thing is, making standing rules for Guam Youth Congress, we can start from scratch again. You know what I mean? Like, we can implement new things for every time we start, every new term we start. Like, we can amend the rules. And as we said, that rules are not absolute. Sometimes it is open for interpretation and make such amendments that we can do so to accommodate the situation that we are on. And if we don't amend it, like if there's only 3 members in a committee, and I think it's a violation of this rule as what we have right now. Like, we can ask legal counsel for that if it is still a committee with 3 members, if we don't change the rules. But if we change it, then it's legal to have at least 3 members in a committee, since the number of our representatives are going down due to that term we are in is ending and is decreasing. And I hope that everyone support this resolution. And I want to thank everyone for your input. I make a motion to move Resolution 18-31 to third reading file.
There's a motion to move resolution 18-31 to the third reading file. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Thank you, Representative LeBang, and with that, we have exhausted our agenda for today. We can now move on to second roll call. Representative Valencia, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a motion that the second roll call reflect the first one.
Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Moving on to consideration of the daily file. Can I get the third reading file?
Bill number 22-31, as amended by the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs. Introduced by Christian F. Valencia, Jacob G. Richards, Keandra M. McDonald, Stephanie F. L. Lorenzo, Javen W. Flores. Javen W. Santos. An act to establish a youth mental health first aid training and certification program for all Guam Department of Education GDOE personnel, to appropriate the sum of $120,000 to be amortized for a period of 3 fiscal years for the implementation of the program, and to cite this act as the Youth Mental Health First Aid Act of 2018.
Roll call.
Representative Blas. Representative Blas, aye. Representative Cruz. Representative Cruz, aye. Representative DeChoso. Representative DeChoso, aye. Representative Felisan. Representative Felisan, aye. Representative LeBang. Representative LeBang, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative McDonald. Representative McDonald, aye. Representative Quintanilla. Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Richards. Representative Richards, aye. Representative Rigetti. Representative Rigetti, aye. Speaker Santos. Speaker Santos, aye. Representative Valencia. Representative Valencia, aye.
With a vote of 12 ayes, the bill number 22-31 hereby passes.
Bill number 24-31, as amended by the Committee on Public Safety, Judiciary, and Homeland Security, and further amended on the floor. An act to amend Section 10.25 of Chapter 10, Title 8, Guam Code Annotated, add a new Section 25.50 to Chapter 25, Title 9 GCA, relative to increasing the age of consent from 16 to 18 years of age, and citing this act as the Age of Protection Act of 2018.
Roll call.
Representative Blas. Representative Blas, aye. Representative Cruz. Representative Cruz, aye. Representative Dichoso. Representative Dichoso, pass. Representative Felisan. Representative Felisan, nay. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, pass. Representative McDonald. Representative McDonald, aye. Representative Quintaniza. Representative Quintaniza, aye. Representative Richards. Representative Richards, pass. Representative Rigetti. Representative Rigetti, aye. Speaker Santos. Speaker Santos, nay. Representative Valencia. Representative Valencia, pass. Representative Dichoso. Representative Dichoso, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, nay. Representative Richards. Representative Richards, nay. Representative Valencia. Representative Valencia, aye.
With a vote of 8 ayes and 4 nays, the bill number 24-31 hereby passes. Moving on to resolution number 18-31.
Resolution number 18-31, introduced by Al Edrich C. Labang, relative to amending 16.01A of Iminet 31 na Congresyon Manhobin Guahan Orden Acramentu, the 31st Guam Youth Congress Standing Rules pertaining to the membership and composition of standing committees.
Roll call.
Representative Blas. Representative Blas, pass. Representative Cruz. Representative Cruz, aye. Representative Dichoso. Representative Dichoso, aye. Representative Felisan. Representative Felisan, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, pass. Representative McDonald. Representative McDonald, nay. Representative Quintaniza. Representative Quintaniza, aye. Representative Richards. Representative Richards, aye. Representative Rigetti. Representative Rigetti, aye. Speaker Santos.
Aye.
Speaker Santos, aye. Representative Valencia. Representative Valencia, pass. Representative Blas. Representative Blas, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative Valencia. Representative Valencia, pass. Representative Valencia. Representative Valencia, aye.
With the vote of 11 ayes and 1 nay, resolution number 18-31 hereby passes. And with that, we are done with voting. Moving on to brief extensions of remarks. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on the issues we discussed today? Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
I just want to thank my colleagues for voting for my resolution. I think with just few months that we have right now, I think we can still do a lot of things. And with that said, I hope working with everyone on committees, and I think we should kind of reshuffle, like put more people in committees, especially I know Representative Angara and Ken McDonald left. Kind of the only person in the Committee on General Government Operations. So I wish that committee should be filled with more people and hope that you guys join.
Point of information, I have not received resignation letters from Representative McDonald and Representative Angara.
I want to say that potentially they might leave soon because they're going college off island.
Okay. Thank you, Representative LeBang. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the matters we discussed today? Representative Valencia, you're recognized. Awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd also like to thank my colleagues here for unanimously passing Bill number 22-31, and I hope to gain their support as we continue this effort into pushing this legislation to the legislature. And with that said, also, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to, notwithstanding our House rules, that we go back to motions in terms of the committee chairpersonship of the Committee on Education.
Oh, okay. Is anyone opposed to that? Seeing as there are none, so ordered. We are back in motions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd now like to make a motion to open the nomination for the chairmanship of the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs.
There's been a motion to open the floor for nominations, or I'm sorry, yeah, there's been a motion to open the floor for nominations for this chairmanship of Education and Youth Affairs. That chairmanship has been vacated by Representative Stiles, so that chairmanship is now open. Is there anyone opposed to opening the floor? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We're now open to nominations for the chairperson of Education and Youth Affairs.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Valencia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to nominate Representative Al Edwards C. LeBang for the chairmanship of the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs.
Representative LeBang, do you accept your nomination?
As a future educator, as I said, I do accept.
All right. Is there any other nominations? If there's no nominations, could I get a motion to close the nominations for Representative Valencia, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to close the nomination for the chairmanship of the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone opposed to that? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Seeing as nominations are closed, can I get a vote for all those in favor of Representative LeBang serving as the chair by show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. With 12 votes, Representative LeBang is the new chair on Education and Youth Affairs. Are there any other motions? Okay, so seeing as there are none, we can move back into a brief extension of remarks. Representative Dichoso, did you have a brief extension of remarks?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to explain why I voted yes for the bill that I voted yes for. Bill 24-31. The reason why is because, and also I just wanted to make a point that I didn't make during discussion, only because it was irrelevant in terms of how I felt about the bill, but I feel it is relevant now that we discussed it. And that is, I see the bill more as a first step, but I am hard-pressed in seeing it as the solution to these issues. As with all government measures, there's no guarantee that this will solve the issues that it intends to tackle. There is still underage drinking. That's something we see all the time. There's still drugs in use by the youth. We see that all the time as well. And even if this bill passes, even if people see that the law is now, the law now states that the age of consent is 18 years old, I'm not wholly convinced that that's going to stop underage sex. And I do see that the best solution, that this is a good first step. However, the best solution that we should have is to inculcate a culture or a society of virtue and leading by example and showing our peers as fellow youth members that we are, that it may be better to lead a life of abstinence from both drugs, from alcohol, and sex. So that's all I wanted to remark on. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dichoso. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the matters we discussed today? Representative Richards, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to reflect on why I voted the way I did for Bill 24-31. And I regret that I wasn't able to gather my thoughts into a coherent testimony for it. But I voted no for the similar reason to why Representative Dichoso voted yes. But I felt that it is a step forward, but it wasn't a viable solution for the statements in the intent of the bill. And that's why I voted no. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Richards. Is there anyone else who wishes to make remarks on the matters we've discussed today? Seeing as there are none, let us move on to announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? Representative Felison, you are recognized.
You didn't even turn it off. But if anyone's not doing anything today at 5, oh, and that's not like a proposal for a date, but at 5, my band is going to be performing in the Micronesia Mall, so please come watch that. We're just the pre-show for the Guam Territorial Band because it's been part of like a Liberation Day performances. And then on Sunday, we're going to be having an encore at again a shopping center at 5 at the same time. Thank you.
Are you opening for the Guam Territorial Band on Sunday as well?
No, Sunday is just, they only asked the rock band to do an encore.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Representative Felison. Is there anyone else who has announcements? Representative Dichoso?
Yes, an announcement. Something really exciting is happening this year, November 10. If you remember last year, we had the first ever Life Teen Expo. I am part of the core committee again this year in planning it, and so we're planning to have it on November 10. I'm actually not sure if I was allowed to share that yet, but I'm just putting it out there right now because we are interested in having Youth Congress be a part of it in some way. We're still in the planning stages, but one of my ideas is to have like a congressional corner, maybe, something like that. And maybe we can teach the youth about, or teach teens about bills, the process of like how law is made. You know, that's something we can make it fun, you know, make it interactive. And maybe they can write their own bills as well, and that would help us in Youth Congress, you know, come up with ideas, I guess, and see where the youth and their focus really is. So save the date, November 10. I will keep you guys posted in case there are any date changes, because the date did change from another date to November 10. So I'll keep you guys posted. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Choso. That will be like either in the midst of the elections or that will be like at the start of the next term. But I'm pretty sure whoever is still a part of the Youth Congress who pursues their term would be more than happy to take part in that. It sounds really cool. Is there anyone else who has announcements? Representative LeBang?
I just want to ask if there's any update for the Youth Leadership Award.
We can, Representative Lorenzo, did you want to talk on that?
So as of right now, we currently have 9 nominations. We initially scheduled, we scheduled it to be for today, but leadership has just been kind of busy with that. But we are hoping to get the ceremony. We're hoping to get the ceremony by August. We already talked to Senator Lee's office, and they are helping us with the ceremony, the decorations, and all of that. So yes, it is still in progress. We will be giving out awards before before our term ends. So is that good? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lorenzo, and thank you for Representative LeBang. We are working on August for the Excellence of the Youth Leadership Award. We're working on getting in contact with the nominees or the nominators so that we can start the process with those who were nominated. So that's mainly our challenge right now. Are there any other announcements? Representative Richards?
Not an announcement, but an idea, because school will be starting, as we all know, next month, and I think it'd be a good opportunity for us to go out and visit some of the high schools, or we've talked about this before, to do like a representative drive to encourage people to run, to represent their schools and their villages. And if anybody's interested in that, I think it would be cool to discuss that and move forward with it.
Sure, yeah. We can, did you say you wanted to discuss it on the floor now? Oh, okay. I thought you said you wanted to discuss it on the floor. Okay, but yeah, we can discuss it. Is there any other announcements? Seeing as there are none, could I get a motion to adjourn? Representative Valencia, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to make a motion to adjourn the session, subject to the call of the Speaker.
Is there anyone opposed? Seeing as there are none, session for the 31st Guam Youth Congress is hereby adjourned.